Welcome to the Dog Trainers Podcast,
a podcast created by dog trainers for dog trainers or anyone who's ever fallen in love with man's best friend.
Hey everybody, welcome back and thank you so much for listening to the Dog Trainers Podcast. Mariano Alvarez here with Brent LaBrada, and a very special guest we'll be announcing in just a second. First, we want to give shout outs to people that have been showing us love and support online, so without further ado, shout out to Mindful Canine Utah, Haley White at Coastal Canine, Undercover Alpha Canine, Robin Ann in Bangkok, Dina Casalini, and Paws on the Ground Dog Training. How are you guys? We love you guys, and with that, over to you, Brent.
What's up, guys? Today's guest is a very special guest that we've been trying to get on the podcast for many, many months. We got to meet her last year, and we just want to, with no further ado, please just introduce Dr. Melanie Ude. How are you?
I'm doing very well. Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Very cool. Thank you so much for joining us. You know, to tell the audience a little bit about how we got to meet you and introduce you. You know, last year we were able to have the privilege of working within certain circles, Michael Ellis and Dr. Stuart Hilliard, and we got commissioned to organize an event. And we kept hearing like, oh, you should invite Dr. Ude. You should invite Dr. Ude. And for some reason, we just assumed Dr. Ude was like this very, very old European man. And we were just like, okay, we'll send us his information. And they're like, we're going to send you Melanie's number. And we're like, Melanie, she's a woman. And then even more, she's a young woman and she's a doctor and she's a researcher and then it's just accolade after accolade after accolade. And it was just so awesome to finally meet you in person. Yeah, you joined us for an event that we were doing with Dr. Hilliard. And not only, you know, was your presence wonderful and you were very kind and very fun and all of that stuff, but to hear you talk science, that's when we knew, like, we got to get you on this podcast. So thank you for joining us on the Dog Trainers Podcast. So here we go.
Thank you again for having me.
You're so welcome. You are so welcome. Mariano, you want to take it away?
Yes. So, I think the best place to start is usually at the beginning. So if we could, Melanie, let's go over a bit of your history in academia as well as your beginnings in dog training. When did those two things start to intermingle?
They started to intermingle probably the very first time in 2016, which is, what is it? Almost 10 years, 8 years ago.
10, yeah. Eight.
Yeah.
6, 8, 10.
Sorry,
right.
Yeah.
Very good. Very good. Okay, we all clearly math, maybe not.
We're all good at math. We work with dogs.
But that was basically I wouldn't say the end, but maybe the start of the ending of my heavily academic-driven career. At that time, I was doing research at Columbia University in New York City. And without going into detail what exactly I was researching, because it probably doesn't matter that much, but it was related to gut and brain health. So for the last 5 years, I've been really digging deep into mainly with human diseases. But, you know, when you have research topics, how this works is you kind of just get good at like really digging in. Inevitably, you learn about these kind of things like the gut and the brain health in other animals. You read all kinds of studies with animal models, and it wasn't specifically for dog behavior, but generally how this works in the universe, in life. And then I was volunteering in Thailand for a clinic there to help migrants from Myanmar get the healthcare that they need. And funny enough, because it was a little tiny small town in the north of Thailand, I was there for 6 weeks by myself, going on my bike from my little hut where I was staying to the laboratory. And, you know, as you can imagine, there's a bunch of dogs hanging out, village dogs. And they were just not hanging out. They were in the middle of the street that I was going down. And there was no one in the morning. So it was just me and the dogs. And it was almost like having a little standoff. And they probably knew exactly what they're doing, what they're not doing, but I had no idea what I was doing, what I was not doing, or what I was supposed to do. You know, it's like this misconception that I had at the time. That's like, okay, these are barking dogs and they're following me and they're probably aggressive and they probably want to hurt me, which was clearly not the case because I got out alive and without any kind of major injuries.
It's a dead giveaway.
But I had no idea what I was doing. And and I had no idea how to read them. And, here I was like with my 12 years of academic research, and the first 5 years I studied biology, and it was animal physiology, it was animal neurobiology, it was animal genetics. And yet when you're faced with it can get wilder, as in if you're really in the wild. But, I was a small village with these village dogs that never probably had seen a collar in their entire life. You get faced with that and makes you wonder. I was like, what do I really know? And what have I studied? And who does take advantage of what I have studied? And can I actually use my knowledge to understand this better? And it wasn't like a decision overnight where I said, I'm going to quit my research academic career and go into, dog training and all. But it kind of, the seed was planted an inception, right? It kind of like a dream, and the dream and the dream was kind of evolving. Ultimately, my idea, what would kind of then rose to reality or to actionable steps, was I kind of don't want to go further down the academic career where you start to become more and more detail-oriented for a specific project. And I wanted to zoom out and really kind of take away from what is already there, all the research we know, the science we know, and really translate it to things that people at home can indulge in too, or get excited about, or leverage for their hands-on training, and for myself too, and my own dogs, right? And that kind of then snowballed into me going to corporate to kind of finance this transition, and then me starting my own business. And first, the whole shebang of going to people's home, training their dogs, bringing dogs to my home, shadowing other trainers, studying other trainers, and then pulling in the science. And then it kind of naturally evolved to Canine Decoded, what it is today, basically.
That's awesome. And I was reading back through your, I guess, series of accolades. I don't know if that's the way to put it, or your just kind of academic career. And something that really stood out to me, which I think is really cool, is in the modern day, dog training seems to be expanding its perspectives. Now there are people who are coming from academia, people who are coming from, we know a couple of sisters in Chile and Ecuador that are, one's like a marketeer and one was a therapist. So, they have such now a different perspective on dog training and training people who train their dogs. And as I read back through, so let's say you were an associate research scientist at Columbia, right? CUMC. You were a data science modeler for Cabbage, head of data science for Pad Split, and then started Canine Decoded. So my first question then becomes, what do you actually scratch that? My first question becomes, I'm looking at Canine Decoded's website right now. Do you write a lot of this copy yourself on the blog?
I wrote it all. I do everything myself. Yeah.
That's mega impressive, because something that I really respect about you is the same sort of thing I respect with Dr. Hilliard, which is very hard to do, is you guys have this level of academic understanding, and yet the ability to make it very whittled down and very user friendly is impressive. I signed up for the couple ebooks that you can have sent to your email, reading through the blog. You also had some blog posts on LinkedIn, right? And you do little things to make them very appealing to the eye. They're not overly wordy. It was super impressive. So I guess what I'm asking here is, was there a separate skill on top of researching that you had to work on? Are you a big novel fan or something that makes you really concise with what you're writing?
Well, I think there's, for me, I'm obviously I want to help dogs, but something that I always have in the back of I pay a lot of attention to the user experience of people that consume my content or that work with me. Maybe that comes from me being corporate a little bit, because, working in an area in data science where, we build things that people are supposed to buy and use. One big thing is you have to make it user friendly. And I think that kind of holds up with creating and consuming content as well, because I want people to get excited and not bored by what I do. It doesn't mean that it kind of just came naturally. Did dove into storytelling, and I read every night fiction books, not because I think I can learn from it. I just like it. This is my way of kind of being out of reality for a little bit. So every night there's some fiction, and these are the most beautiful storytelling things. And I think it's just absorbing this kind of passively, more or less, helps me creating content the way that makes other people want to consume it.
What are some of your favorite authors?
So Haruki Murakami, the Japanese author, one of my favorite ones. Taylor Jenkin, I like her too. Very different authors, very different. And then currently, it's not so much nonfiction. It's not so much fiction. It's actually nonfiction from Paul Rosali. He's a guy who protects the Amazon, and he talks about which reads like fiction because you would think it's impossible to experience this, but his excursion in the Amazon and seeing all this wildlife and kind of bringing in the beauty of wilderness kind of to the forefront.
That's amazing. Yeah, I think what I'm getting at here is you have this ability to convey a message. Clearly, you have the information to formulate the message, but I feel like people in the modern day, I look at social media dog trainers and academic dog trainers and all these things, and they tend to have one thing or the other. I can understand it, but can't regurgitate it. Or I'm good at regurgitating what I know, but it's not as much as I should know, perhaps, right? And I think that you're this new but totally rare and very needed breed in the dog training world, so it's exciting. So with your ability to convey message, I guess the next question becomes, Canine Decoded, what is the message? What is it that you're really trying to bring to dog training today?
That's a good question. And I didn't know what my message is until maybe 3 years in of the 6-7 years that I've been doing it. And I think, and it changed even from time to time, because probably everyone who starts in the dog training world comes in and has a certain opinion about things. And then they maybe go in the opposite direction.
They grow, yeah.
And then you kind of soften it. Like the borders become less stringent, less tough, and you open up a little bit. And I think one of the biggest messages that I'm trying to convey is, for one, we don't know what even remotely, like we don't know enough. Knowing that we don't know enough kind of keeps you a little bit more open-minded. We are very, very, sometimes very happy with our protocols that we're using, and then you're trying to stick to this protocol rather than zooming out sometimes a little bit more and just thinking back, what's the animal in front of us? And using science, and not just neurobiology, on neuroscience, just happen to have the biggest passion for that, but genetics, ethology, taking snippets here and there, not using science to show off and it's like, oh, this paper showed this and that, but really just to critically think about what we're doing with our dogs, because we do need to change directions a little bit at some point, because we're going down a wrong path here. And like thinking that dogs or animals, they're good at what they need to be good at. And genetics hasn't caught up with the demands of society that we put on our dogs. They're good at what they need to be good at. So can we leverage what they're good at? And we measure intelligence often with border collies being able to tap 100 buttons and know 1,000 words. Sure. But it's not the true intelligence that nature really gives these dogs, right? Their olfactory system, they want to move, they have the ability to work with us, to see things and be vigilant. And we sometimes kind of forget about these natural things that they come with, what I think is true intelligence, and work with that to steer them in the direction that makes them a little bit more suitable to society. And we bring in like some science here and there, but more importantly, to really compile this into, take these golden nuggets and really hone into what the dog in front of you is, and then create a life that kind of aligns a little bit more with the beast in the dog, the natural beast, the beauty in the beast.
That's a really cool perspective, actually. So it's interesting to think about it that way, that dogs are only, how old are dogs? Like 30,000 years?
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, whereas humans are like 300,000. So it's actually a really interesting perspective that they haven't had the time to evolve into the modern day and the demands in the modern. And then on top of that, human society is 5,000 years old? So yeah. So it is actually a really interesting perspective. And so I think, if I'm not misunderstanding, and you tell me if I am, the perspective is you're kind of playing two cards. One is, let me help these dogs catch up and live in a successful human society, like a city. But at the exact same time, understand that these things are pretty far back. So you're trying to be a bit, I don't think remedial is quite the word, but you understand what I'm saying, like meet them in the middle.
Right. Yes, okay. Exactly. Like whatever we can do to help them kind of bridge the gap a little bit with like what the genetic makeup tells them to do and what we want them to do, and also accept that sometimes, it's just not a good match, and we kind of need to see that a little bit better so that we can create some whatever training programs it is to help them live still their best life that way.
Sure. A kind of a sub question I have. I'm still looking at the personality guide here, and I'm actually looking at the email that the personality guide comes in. Was there a specific series of books or lectures or something that you look up either in school or afterward to help you kind of formulate and craft? I know that you're a big nonfiction fan, but there's little touches in these emails that they're like really funny and kind of disarming in a cool way. Like the email where you get this thing, it's got like the girl from Schitt's Creek going, "Can't wait," and stuff like that in it. Was there something that you kind of looked into, or someone that you looked up to who was like, "Here, be personal with it, be easygoing with it"?
There's nothing very specific, but what I do is I subscribe to a lot of other people's newsletters that has nothing to do with dog training. So a lot of my creative aspects, they come from outside of dog training, because I do think, like you said, right, and I'm really happy that someone kind of acknowledges and recognizes that is, we kind of need to. Sometimes the dog trainers, and you can probably understand it, and dog owners, we're very like
formal and rigid and stuffy.
Yes,
and
do this, don't do this, do this, don't.
Right.
Here's the tip, here's what you don't, stop doing that. And sometimes I'm like that too, right? But like if you fluffen it up a little bit, and kind of don't take everything so seriously, that can help to have more aha moments, right? And start to be a little bit more critical about everything.
Yeah.
And these giffies and all that is when I get emails, I'm like, what catches my attention? And then I translate this to, okay, well, and also this is also part of my personality, right? Like I'm trying to instill that as well.
Sure.
Yeah,
like kind of building.
You can tell that you're funny.
Building the brand
in
of just who you
your
are.
products. Yeah.
Yeah, that's super cool. So with that being said, the message more or less of Canine Decoded seems to be dogs can be capable of evolving with us essentially, but they need our help. They're behind the ball, right? And the mechanism that you use is ever expanding. So you started doing, forgive me, because I don't know like how recent this was. I've seen a few of your interviews, as in that you've conducted. I know that you had interviewed Ivan Balabanov. I saw a couple other interviews. Was one like a Harvard professor? I was going to watch that one today, actually. Talk to me about what was the idea there. You went from like really beautiful ad copy and blog posts to conducting interviews.
I just thought, like, if I have all these questions, probably others may or may not have them too, or they don't know how to have more questions. You know what I mean? Like, if you always talk about these same things, and nowadays in social media, where it all evolves around best dog training methods, but let's take a look behind the scenes of other things that also involve dogs. For example, with Dr. Anne Hecht from Harvard, I mean, her entire neuroscience department is about dogs. That's incredible, and that was not existing like 20 years ago. Yeah, and what they are doing is like really, really important stuff that can help determine, better breeding programs, better selection for working dogs, better understanding between dogs and children, how they help each other overcome maybe mental disorders and anxiety. All these things, I think, are like much more profound than what we sometimes get hung up on. So, but I'm not the one who either owns these projects, nor do I have the best insights into this, right? So I'm like, okay, well, let's bring them in. And what I do like is bringing some people from like the dog aging project, like bringing people in that lead these science projects, but at the same time also bring in trainers, and without me telling anyone what to do or what not to do. Hopefully with this collection, I heard this from a science person, I heard this from a practitioner person, and I can put one on one together because it makes sense, or maybe align with my experience. And that way you kind of feel a lot more confident in what you are doing and creating your own maybe programs or your own protocols. And you're not just doing because everyone else is doing it.
Totally. I have one more question for you, then I'm going to let Brent throw a few at you. So this position that you have, which is it's like an academic, I'm going to formulate my position based on X, Y, and Z, and then I'm going to kind of more or less like average them out. And if this person feels this way and this other person feels this way, and both of them are different sort of professionals to the same sort of field, then I'm going to gauge my interest and like act accordingly. That in itself is a skill, or is a thought process that a lot of dog trainers don't necessarily possess. And I say that not as a slight, but I say that because whenever we have guests on who have gone through lots of schooling, who have impressive backgrounds, academically speaking, and you guys make beautiful content, be it written, video, whatever, right? Interviews. My request, if this is a request, is I would love to see a series of whatever it is, lectures, blog posts, etc., on that process. Here's how I establish what it is that I'm going to look into further. If I do that, here's the type of note-taking that I do. And once I've heard several different positions, here's how I whittle them down into what I think is important. Just that sort of process, like learning how to learn, is a very undervalued skill.
That's a good point. I like that a lot. Maybe I will write or do something about it. For me, and I sometimes underestimate how difficult it can be, and I totally acknowledge now that it can be difficult if you're not used to doing research a certain type of way, being able to filter out quickly what is relevant and what not. You get lost and you get discouraged.
Right.
I just happened to do this for 12 years, right? This comes so natural to me. I can screen through things super, super quickly, and I know how to research because there are like millions of publications out there. Finding relevant ones really depends on a super optimized keyword search strategy. In general, how I start is, from the highest level possible, and hear certain people like listening to podcasts, and it doesn't happen necessarily intended, just by exposing yourself. And I always tell people, don't just listen to dog trainers and don't listen to dog professionals, listen to other people that do other things with other animals, or that solve problems in other areas. And then ideas just come to me, sometimes in the car. Somehow my office is in the shower. I don't know. I get all my ideas always in the shower. It probably happens to a lot of people. But it's like, I need someone needs to invent kind of like a pen and a pad that is waterproof, that I can write in the shower so I don't constantly have to cut it short.
Sure.
So, and then I start usually finding textbooks. The downside of it is they're like freaking expensive. I don't know why it's always been like this. And it's like you need just one chapter and spend a lot of money, but I'm addicted to books, so I don't necessarily mind. So I start with textbooks and as relevant as possible and see what kind of references they have. Then I go to meta-analyses, reviews. You can really type in review neurobiology aggression, I don't know, and see what pops up there. And in reviews, you see better publications. And then I go to these publications and then I literally type in names of these professors and see if they had podcasts, and then kind of circles back to a higher level. And then I sometimes, if it's something that I find interesting, I want to connect it to what people might have issues with. So it's just like keyword search, or what is being asked a lot on social media, YouTube and whatnot. And if it's something I'm very aware that there is an issue in the dog training world, then I just translate it to, these are the steps, here's the resources, and this is the package, the content package that I'm bringing it to you.
And that's smart for those listening, because what Melanie was explaining was not only a way to look into content to see if it piques your interest and see if it's something you want to study, but it's also a free way to look into a lot of this stuff. Because I don't know, Melanie, if you still have access through your universities, but a lot of things like Wiley, Open Athens, like a lot of that stuff is expensive. And I tried to subscribe to, I think it was Open Athens, and you can't even if I wanted to pay it, you can't. There wasn't an option to just like pay something monthly or annually. It was like, I need to know your institution. So for you to look into if these professors have done interviews and stuff like that, well, that's free. That's a matter of like Spotify or YouTube. Yeah. Makes sense.
Yes. And TED, like some of the really good ones I talk about is Dr. David Anderson. He's really good searching fear and aggression. He has TED Talks. TED Talks are amazing. It kind of gives you like everything you need to know. And then you go and drill down. They tend to have websites. And then, sometimes you can stop at that level. You don't have to, as a young dog trainer, maybe that's important to say, you don't have to know everything all at once. I've been there. It burns you out. and it's not necessary. And then you just question yourself and you feel like you're imposter and whatnot. Things will come to you when they need to come to you, and they will make sense to you when they need to make sense to you. Like, there have been dog training around before we had any kind of bigger, deeper understanding of dogs, right? And we made our way through this, and we lived our own domestication continued and all that. So it's like picking one thing that you may be mostly interested in. Maybe it's just separation anxiety. Maybe it's just leisure activity, although this kind of gets you down the rabbit hole too. And then just do some research there for a month or two. And that's it.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
If I can jump in, if for listeners, I have a little bit of a lag on my end. So just want to kind of talk about the elephant in the room. I haven't really been talking because I'm a little insecure about the lag on the internet. So I want to recap a couple of things. Like, you guys are scientists, like you guys are super academic. You guys know all these words and all these things. And I'm just a layman. And for a lot of our listeners, I really would love it if we could just kind of very quickly, to whatever degree you'd like to, Melanie, I would like to go back through your education and kind of like what you've learned, when you learned it. Because, in our notes, it's like data science modeler of cabbage. I don't know what cabbage is. You know what I mean? Like, so for people who don't know the scientific world, I would love to know kind of just your journey of education and kind of, a couple bullet points, move on, a couple bullet points, like whatever you're comfortable with, because I know you're extremely intelligent and smart just by talking to you. But, I'd love to learn what you learned, when you learned it, how you learned it, and the biggest takeaways from those experiences, if we could.
Yeah, I think that's a good question. But maybe I can use that to highlight why sometimes things are overestimated or underestimated, and you don't have to have something that you think you need in order to succeed in some ways. So
yeah.
I went to college in my hometown Jena in Germany, and I studied biology because I always wanted to know everything about animals. And at the time, we didn't have the bachelor-master's type of setup as we have now. It was by default, you go to college for 5 years, and then you get something that is equivalent to the master's now. And I was in biology, and I don't even remember what I specialized in. I could pick 2 subjects. I think it was physiology and maybe neurobiology or microbiology. I don't really remember. And then from there, it's like, I'm going to go down this whole route, the academic route. I'm going to be a professor at some point. So I did my PhD in Hamburg in Germany. There, it was very specific to tropical diseases. Seems very random, but you learn pretty much everything. How the immune system works, how it affects behavior, if something is off. It went really deep down into how to set up animal models, genetics. Like, that was quite an intense 3 years. So I did my PhD in 3 years. And then from there, I was like, okay, I'm going to go to New York City and apply to Columbia University. What was interesting at this position was, at this point, it was all basic research or fundamental understanding of all aspects of biology. So my PhD, it literally says PhD in natural sciences. So natural sciences include mostly like biology, obviously, but anything that is like in nature. So that's how the PhD program was set up. So not that I know everything and anything, right? So I can on the basic level probably give you a lot of information about a lot of fields, but I would have to look up things again if I had to go down in more detail. At Columbia University, I was what is called translational research, which means I was bridging what is being done in research in the lab with me hands-on doing experiments and what doctors do with their patients. So I was at the medical school, like the hospital literally, and I would meet with doctors to tell them what I did in my research, what we found, and they would sometimes in the moment, maybe not in the moment, but next day when they see patients, change something. And that was interesting because I really liked the idea of this, which is what I do now with the translation of science to hands-on dog training. And the other thing is that I was leading a smaller research group. So I had master students, bachelor students, interns, and basically teaching them what they need to do is one thing. But also you're on your own. You're on your own. No one helps you in this case. And you kind of just do your own thing. As in you have to make sure you apply for grants, you get published. Like the whole really maybe annoying part of being in research and frustrating part of being in research. And you really learn to be very careful, like what you cite, how you cite it, how you put together research projects, how you narrate it and all these things. So these are like probably the knowledge came from my really early studies. So being in college, doing my PhD, I think is really being dependent that way, teaching others. I was giving lectures on nutrition and the life cycle to retirees, so people who want to continue learning, which is really a lot of fun. And they just wanted to have fun and learn a little bit. And that was basically my biggest takeaways from the academic research, especially in the last 5 years before I left. Now in the corporate world, so I'm transitioning to corporate, and it's like, what do you do? And because I work with a lot of data from patients and human samples, it made sense for me to apply to be a data scientist, which means machine learning and AI. So I would go I had to learn coding. That was tricky,
hard.
but I did it.
Yeah.
I had to learn coding, and then worked as a data scientist, and then had a data scientist of a fintech company first. So Cabbage is a fintech company. And yes, I was working with financial data, but I was like creating machine learning models. And machine learning models is like, based on these events, these kind of observations, what is the machine learning, the algorithm predicting the outcome is. And machine learning, especially AI and neural networks, they are mimicking how the brain works because the brain is constantly predicting something. And the funny thing is, this is what I have in mind when I look at my dog. And it's like, what is their brain predicting? What are the variables that they're taking in? What has fed this model that is in their brain, our brain too? So there's a very clear correlation to what I was just putting into code, which is literally getting the inspiration from nature. So, and the same I was doing at the real estate tech company, predicting how someone would behave, giving all these variables. Directly correlated to predicting how a dog would behave or what the dog's own brain says. The best outcome will be this for me, my survival, my comfort and whatnot. And all these things, they kind of accumulated. Being independent, right? Having these knowing how to research, understanding a little more deeper the mechanism of neural networks, how the brain works, and then kind of putting this all together with my own dogs and then with other dogs. And translating it and putting it into some written context so others can consume it.
Yeah, and ultimately just translating it so that dummies like me can understand it. So that's amazing. That is really, really amazing. I was following that whole journey in my mind and kind of throwing in pictures, and like I always play things as a movie. When people tell me a story, I just play it in my mind as a movie, and it's a really cool journey. It's a really, really cool journey. I want us to take a quick little commercial break, and then we're going to come back and finish up this interview with Dr. Melanie Ude. And break.
Welcome back, guys. Thank you again so much for listening to the Dog Trainers Podcast. This is an interview with Dr. Melanie Ude. Just before we went on break, we were going over her impressive accolade in history and academia and in dog training. And we want to dive back in by shifting gears a little bit more toward the modern state of dog training. So with that, over to you, Brent.
Yeah. So we got to meet Melanie in really great company. We had Dr. Stuart Hilliard there. We had Michael Ellis there. And a whole bunch of other high-class dog trainers. And what I want to know is how did you get in? How did you meet them? How did we end up crossing paths with you? How did your journey in dog training lead you to where we ran into you? Please tell me that story.
I think, fortunately, it was very organic, because if I would have put in this room earlier, and that doesn't mean I wasn't I was intimidated too. Like, this is just one of those things like, holy cow, what am I supposed to say here? But if this would have happened a year earlier or 2 years earlier, then I would have been so out of place. As I was scavenging the internet for things to learn more, and like I said, I was shadowing other trainers. I wanted to know, like all trainers, I didn't pick any kind of camp when we talk about reinforcement only or balanced. I was just wanted to know. And also, truth be told, when I started, I had no idea what that really meant. And it didn't make sense to me. It still doesn't. But I was, okay, let's just learn as much as we can. And then eventually, I ended up with content from Learberg or Michael Ellis. And the way he explained things, and, you know, everyone who follows him knows that he has also a great way to explain things.
Mm-hmm.
But it really clicked with how my brain works. Because he threw in like really not just tactical things like what to actually do, but had little snippets of neurobiology or genetics and whatnot that really resonated with me, because I need to know, I'm someone who needs to know why I'm doing it before I'm doing it. So anyone who would like me to do something can't just tell me to do it. I need to understand why. And probably because I, coming from academia, it's kind of like how you're being taught to work. But because it resonated so much with me, I kind of just, you know, started following more and stuff and started to take his classes and went to his seminars. At the seminar that he held in Wisconsin at Learberg, I was there. It's the first time we talked a little bit more. I told him about some of the research. We stayed in touch. And then I presented at the International Working Dog Conference in Colorado last year. And Michael Ellis said, you need to meet Dr. Stuart Hilliard, who happened to be there. And so I went up to Stuart and was like, hey, I'm Melanie. You don't know me, but I know you. And we started talking and we just connected. And that way, it kind of just opened up. And then 3 months later, the event near LA where we all met happened. So at this point, it's like for me also the first time, you know, meeting Forrest, and you know Michael, and you watch his content, you also see Forrest, and then I knew you guys from your podcast, but I never met you before, and it's like,
awesome.
Oh my God, this is kind of like putting everything in one place. A lot of people that you have like heard of or saw content or have followed, you know, and it just was a very interesting event, and I was very nervous.
Well, you were very welcomed and such a pleasure to have in the room. You would help like make things that Dr. Stuart Hilliard were saying easier to understand. I remember you would like translate things and break things down and take notes for us. And it was very, very, very helpful. But yeah, like, I think that was a really fun experience for us to put that on. And that was kind of our goal, is like take some really excellent dog trainers and put them in a room and learn from Dr. Hilliard. That was kind of the goal. And again, so happy that we met you. Now, what are some of the biggest, like in the last year and a half, what are some things that maybe you've learned from these people that have been influencing you and I simultaneously? Like, what are some things that you've picked up on?
There's so many little things that accumulated. Some things that I find very interesting and that I like have become more like my passion projects are related to specifically learning and arousal. So two things that Michael Ellis talks a lot about too, right, in terms of arousal. First time that I ever really considered arousal being a good thing and how it is being made an evil thing, especially in the pet dog world, and how it actually helps to learn and to memorize and to perform better, which we want our dogs to do in general. But there is, of course, a sweet spot, and there is such thing as too high and there is such thing as too low, but never really talks in like these kind of shades of gray when it comes to arousal. It's either good or bad. And I think him kind of saying, okay, don't train if you don't feel like your dog is invested. And he talks about the flow. It was very interesting to see how he, not so much like exactly this is how you train it down or this is how you train the focused heel, but how he flows in and out of different repetitions of different exercises within the 5-minute training session was very interesting to me. It's like, how is the dog learning? How is the dog remembering what to do? what about it keeps the attention? And then when you try to replicate this for the first time, you're like, that doesn't look anything like what I just saw.
No, it's not. I don't think
this
it works.
is like my dog is already walking up.
Yeah.
There's like no commitment. Like, what the heck? And then, you dive further into this. And then, for me, there was kind of like such a great playground for attention. It's like, oh, what are the elements of attention? It's like how salient the cues, dynamic, surprise, novelty, and then how the brain processes that was like, I went down this rabbit hole very, very deep. So that's something. And then, something that, how some people just say words, and it can be sometimes one word or two words and just sticks with you because there's something more to it. Also, when he talks about empty repetitions. And what is that? Why would anything ever be empty if you repeat it, right? Like learning, like what is the saying? Practice makes
permanent.
Yeah, something.
Or practice makes perfect sense. Or permanent?
Perfect, yeah. Practice makes perfect.
Yeah.
And it's not true. Turns out it's not true. And turns out we've known it for a very long time, but these nuances sometimes get lost and you just repeat things over and over. And these poor dogs have to go through like it again and this again. And how do you identify an empty repetition and all these things? That these two things like learning and arousal and like obviously the combination, how they kind of influence each other, I find incredibly fascinating. Because learning, on the other hand, also happens, especially for pet dog training, doesn't happen just the obedience. Learning happens the second your dog opens his or her beautiful eyes and steps outside the world. And recognizing that and what makes the dog remember, oh, I know this tree, there's a squirrel, there's always a squirrel. And I'm going to pull over as soon as I recognize the corner. These are all learning processes, right? And the environment determines seeking or avoidance, and understanding that is really good. And then from Stuart, truth be told, like he challenges me for sure. It's like he has like these beautiful sentences that just sound amazing, but then if you have to repeat it, what he said, it's like I don't even know where to start to say it, because A, it's not going to sound as beautiful, and B, I'm probably butchering the deep meaning that you just tried to convey. So I just want to like listen, right? And he has like, it's very entertaining, but it's also something, it's so dense that it's hard for me to remember it all. What I took from him is more like a broader sense of, we so misunderstand often our dogs, as in like the effects that our training has on them, especially in the context of the 4 quadrants. And also the things that, like he's big on fallouts, right? And that is incredibly interesting. Fallouts that we don't even see or don't even recognize as being fallouts, because what happens in the brain isn't always visible. And his way of creating, and I think it's like one of these big things he talks about, that the word agency, I really like that. And I'm currently looking more into the research on agency, how it translates into the sensation of how do I, like it's, everyone knows, like I have agency over my decisions. What does it really mean? Being in control, the confidence of it, understanding the cues, how cues can misinterpreted by the dog. So these are, I think, really, really deep and complex topics, but I totally geek out on them. I think they're like really fascinating. I don't know if they're all of them in detail are relevant for just everyone, but I think on a bigger picture, it should be something everyone should think about.
So what do you think about this project that they're working on, the Kinology project with Forrest and Michael and Dr. Hilliard? And it's a really cool mission that we got the privilege of being able to record the first Kinology one, and I edited the hell out of that thing. And if I needed to see things and hear things 30 times, so I would like rewind it, listen to the edit over and over, and then I started piecing all the, as you talked about, the beautiful sentences together. And it's interesting because Doc is really specific about what words he decides to place and when he's giving you a definition. And if you move that word just a little to the left, you fuck the whole definition up, And so So that was my experience. But what do you think about the new Kinology project, like the Kino practitioner thing? Because like I from my understanding, it was a word, it was a thing already, Kinology, but now they're turning it into more of a project, like a mainstream educational like think tank, if you will. What do you think about that?
Yeah, it's like it's becoming a hashtag, right?
Yeah,
Hashtag chronology. It's like instead of you Google something, you chronology something. Something like that.
it's a meme now.
Probably at some
Yeah,
point, right?
yeah, yeah,
I think it's a very beautiful combination of what all of these three guys have been doing throughout their career, and they're playing to each's strength. And it wouldn't be the same without a Michael, without the Stuart, without the Forrest, right? And each of them brings in their personality. Like you said, there's this scientific force that is represented by Stuart, who, like you said, picks words that my English is not my first language. Like I don't even know how to spell this word, but it sounds fantastic. And then you bring in Michael, who kind of like, it's like, oh, you just do this and this and this, right? And then you do this and then you do this. And if you see this, then that, right? And it's like, oh yeah, this is the tactical aspect of it. And then you bring Forrest, who comes in and thinks through it. It's like, you gotta feel it too. And then he brings in, like, Forrest has like these emotions and it's like really thoughtful. It's like, yeah, and it's like, this to make sense too. So it's a really beautiful combination, what they kind of focus on and their way of approaching things. But they all meet in the middle on the same page, more or less.
yeah, yeah.
And whatever kind of person you are, how you learn best, you probably then focus on hoping that the person that speaks the most to you will make sense of it at the end.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they're probably still optimizing this and working on it, but they're on the path of like creating something really, really fantastic that to my knowledge, doesn't exist anywhere else.
That's I've never created that trinity, right? Like the intellect, the tactical, and the emotional. But you see it in all things, right? You see that trinity in all things, and I did not see it represented like that with all three of them. And you're right, that's 100% why Kinology works, and why there's something in it for everybody. Like you can pull something, no matter how you think, how you learn, you're gonna pull something really awesome out of it. Are you going to go to the next Kinology 3?
Yes, I will.
Nice. Well, we're going to be there.
I'll be there in the audience.
Very cool. Yeah, me and Mariano will be there, and I'll be there for a couple days. Mariano's going to be there for the whole thing, but we'll get to see you in person. So that's really exciting.
Cool. Yeah.
Are there any future collaborations that you have with other trainers or any other academics coming up?
I do have things that I want to do and have planned out. They're not set in stone yet. I do have some connections to a research group in Italy, and they do research on playing dogs. And one of the things that I'm interested in is the behavior and the motivation that is attached to social play that may or may not include a toy versus a self-entertaining toy, and kind of get some data around this. So how does it affect the motivation of a dog? How does it affect how the dog feels in that environment? It's very hard to recruit enough dogs and the right people for these kind of things, but that's something that I'm interested in. I do have access to the data of the Dog Aging Project. So that's a survey done by dog owners, 40,000 dog owners.
Whoa.
1,000. So it's a lot of data. And some of the data revolves around anxiety. And for some dogs, they have even genetic data, meaning they did some genetic testing. And the idea is to find potentially some, is a dog a little bit more predisposed to, suffering from anxious behavior given certain genetic markers. I haven't started that yet. It's on my list. It's something I want to do.
Yeah.
And the biggest thing that is coming up end of January, February, is a little bit a combination of what I basically do with all my spread out content, but more condensed into a program that is probably most suitable to younger trainers or like dog owners that are just very enthusiastic, but creating some sort of almost like an academy, right, where you have like what I did with my education. Here's the fundamentals of the most important subjects that are relevant to you as a dog trainer. And then guest lectures from trainers plus scientists that are very exclusive for people who kind of go through that program, to give them the idea of like, don't just listen to me, like me and my voice and how I convey. Obviously, I have an opinion too, but here's also what other trainers say and what other scientists say, and learn to pick out and combine so that you're really independent when it comes to creating your own protocols. Really, what I want to do is kind of like simplicity and innovation together is beautiful, right? Like, don't make it too complicated, but don't make it boring so we're stuck. So let's do something new too.
Like Apple.
It's awesome.
Like Apple.
Like Apple. Yes, exactly like Apple. The Apple of the dog training world.
What would you say?
And then some travels coming up.
Yeah. Sorry, what would you say what is your like, and we can get really granular if you want, but like, what is your why? Like, what is your, like, why all this? Why the dogs? Why all the real, like, what is, you have a new trajectory in life with the dogs. What is your objective? Tell me that. What is the why?
What is the why? The easiest answer, and it might, even if it sounds selfish, because yes, I do want to help dogs, but I also just really I like reading textbooks, studying things I don't know, and then putting it to something that someone else can use it too, which is like the cherry on top. But I'm basically in the field where I do things that I personally really, really enjoy. I like animals. I like being creative. I know we kind of, have all certain views on dog trainers that are mostly on social media. But I really enjoy making fun reels. I really enjoy that. Whether this is about dog training or not, right? I just happen to combine it. And I like learning. And I like getting people excited about learning. That is my why. And it happens to be within dogs because I love dogs. But, the bigger picture really is like, I had so many people come to me and say, I'm now motivated to get a degree in something animal related, something neurobiology related. And I have so many dog owners who just like, I just come to your group calls because I just want to learn. My dog is fine now. We're good. We're on the good path. I just want to learn more. And that's the best. That's the best because I just share I kind of create my universe of people that share same interests. And that's just a fun way to live.
No, I think that's true. Obviously we're in the podcast realm, right? So we're very much in that same headspace. Like, I love teaching, and through teaching comes connection, and through that teaching also there's love, and also there's appreciation for all the shoulders we stand on, and there's also appreciation for history, and there's also appreciation for mankind. There's also appreciation for the natural world, right? Like, there's like all of these things that we're learning about and sharing with each other is just an expression of what I would think of love, of the things that we care about. You know what I mean? So that's awesome. I really, really love that. I love, say the word love a bunch of times. Cool. Mariano, what are you doing over there?
I'm listening, man. So a quick question that I have for you, Melanie, is there, like, as a researcher, you can kind of hear in your thought process, even as you establish your interests. I'm going to start this like Instagram page and do reels, and people who like it and so on. There's a quote I want to share with you and just kind of get your thoughts on. Is the quality of your life depends on the quality of your communication. And the quality of your communication is the quality of questions you ask. And if you want better answers, you must ask better questions.
Mm-hmm. I like it. We are not good at asking good questions. Whether this is when it comes to our own life decisions, or when it comes to working with our dogs, living with other animals. It's we kind of, I don't know if we ever were better, but in today's society, with every single kind of pseudo answer at your fingertips in your phone, it's very hard to ask good questions and be critical about it, even with our own health too. We kind of fall for, shiny objects. And I could be someone who seems to have the best solution very quickly. and take away all your suffering. Again, whether this is with your reactive dog that kind of makes you not go outside again, or your own. But we don't ask the right questions as to like, why would that actually help or not, right? You get things prescribed for your dog or for your own health. You buy supplements for your dog or for your own health. But we don't ask, why would that help, right? Or why would that expert, who is kind of like an outsider, and so many other experts have a different opinion. Why is this person right? Or we have these two camps in dog training. Why there's so many talented dog trainers on either side, have different opinions. We have to ask, well, why is it then that there's superficially like two camps? Maybe there is no such thing as two camps. Maybe there is something else underneath that really makes good dog training good or bad. And, you don't really ask these questions. But if you start to ask better questions, you might not necessarily get answers, or you might not necessarily get better answers, but you sure as hell will increase your quality of life, because you kind of stop pondering over things that maybe don't matter as much, or you're not getting fooled as easily, or you're not spending money on things that really didn't help. And we all go through these things. Like I spent a lot of money on crap that really did not improve my health or life quality. But asking the right questions, regardless of the answer that you get, is a skill to have. And maybe as a researcher, you might get better at it because you have to dig deep. But I think everyone has. There's no reason why, like as the most intelligent species on Earth, there's no reason why we wouldn't be able to ask better questions.
And that's exactly why I brought that up, because I try to whittle down what it is that I really admire about researchers. And I think it's that they're constantly asking questions. And you made an excellent point right at the end there, that you may not get an answer or the answer that you want, or, or so on or so on. But I look at it almost like hopscotch. It's like, even if I don't get an answer, what I did get was a better version of the question. And I'm going to ask it again, and then ask it again, and then ask it again. And it's a really cool way of looking at things, because I think it helps us think long term, I think, or think deeper is essentially what you're saying. Like, sure, you can buy supplements, but like, why? Do you even need them? What if you don't take them? Are there long-term effects? And you just learn how to just ask, why? What happens if I do? What happens if I don't? Right? And I think that is a total skill set that I'm seeing more in dog training, and probably in everything too. But the counterbalance too of information being so readily available, you're saying, is it's kind of this like opposite effect. Information is so easy to like shove down your throat. You don't ask further question. It's just, here's your answer. Ba-bing. Right? And then you mix all that with like just marketeering and building a brand. And I think that is why there's those like two very distinct camps, is because you can package it, you can market it. It's a categorization that doesn't necessarily need to exist in nature. It doesn't make the most technical sense, but for people who are like building a product, it makes sense to whittle down the product into, no, it's just like this, right? And they kind of eliminate any gray area, because everybody wants to distinguish their product. No, mine is super different than yours.
Right.
Right.
Yes. And, when you ask more questions, why is that? Okay, why is that? Why is that? You, at the end of the chain, I think you do end up with very fundamental truths in life that are hard to ignore. You just have to be able to get there. Because if you think about quality of our life, quality of our dog's life, quality of animals, it always comes down to the same things. They have to have good nutrition. They have to have physical, mental exercise, right? They have a good social network. And if you start there, a lot of things fall away that we kind of get sucked into. And we forget about, like what I said, the big data set about the dog aging project as a trend that emerged from just for the first set of like analysis. Like a lot of dogs that have some sort of anxious behavior, signs of anxious behavior, also tend to be the dogs that don't get walks very often or on a regular basis, or don't exercise at all, or don't play with their humans much. So let's start there, right? That's just like, why would some some supplement that increases a certain neurotransmitter that is equally increased during play or physical exercise. And if you kind of drill down, we always come back to the same fundamentals. So, like you said, it might not be the best answer, because sometimes, yes, you can't go on a walk if your dog's super active and you're like in New York City and Manhattan, right? But we can strive to do better by creating alternatives to that, rather than maybe going immediately to medication.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a beautiful simplicity to it. That's another cool thing, is I think that there's this aura around scientific research, and there's obviously technical aspects that are super difficult. Like you were talking about coding. When Dr. Hilliard told me to buy this book on statistics, I hated my life trying to read this thing. But
like, don't ask Stuart for books. Like, you get books that will take you forever to read.
I was chuckling to myself as you were talking about how expensive textbooks are, because of course he sends me a list and he's like, you should buy this. And I'm like, I thought you meant like a book, not like a textbook from freaking, yeah. And he gave me an answer to your question of like, why are they so expensive? I guess it's because they're limited in print, so they have to make up for the cost with less buyers, But in any case, the point that I'm making is there's this thought for me too, because I'm super intimidated by science and people who understand data collection and like very well, because I don't. I think I understand it enough to read papers and sort of get it and like play the game a little bit. But there's this misconception that this is like very difficult, not going to understand it, so on. But you're absolutely right. When you read and understand it a bit, you start to realize scientists think about the world in quite simplistic terms, and it's really beautiful, and it's really fun to see through their eyes.
Yeah. It shouldn't, for anyone, especially now when we have this kind of new publications coming out on dog training and these huge conversations around it, and you see this 15-page paper, and then you try to read the methods because this is what everyone talks about, and you see these names of these statistical tests, and like, I don't know these. I understand why they did certain ways, but why exactly that might be the case for this kind of data set, I don't know either. But I don't think people who want to understand like the concepts of a paper, for example, they don't have to know that. That's what I meant when I say, like, don't get overwhelmed yourself by having to know these statistical tests, because this is just an application. What you want to look at a graph, I just look at the graphs of any kind of scientific paper first. I don't read the discussion. I don't read the introduction. I don't read the abstract. I just look at the graphs. If they are profound enough for me to say, okay, this is good to dig deeper into it. And what does profound mean? You kind of get an intuition the more you look at. But if you have a bar graph, right, like bars, and then there is a line, a straight line, a vertical line between these bar graphs that are huge, they indicate there's a huge variation within the data set. And that's all you sometimes need to know. It's like, okay, there's a huge variation. If it's a laboratory setup, there shouldn't be. They're all kind of the same animals. If it's with dogs or any animals in the wild, it's like, that's interesting. There's a subset that doesn't respond the same as others. And that alone kind of is interesting, and you take away from that. Not so much that there is not a statistical significance. There was almost a statistical significance. It doesn't matter at this point. It's like, there's a variance. There's probably a subset that is an outlier. Let's look into these outliers, because that's probably giving us more clues than trying to figure out p-value less than 0.001. Yes, it's statistical significance. No, there was no cortisol higher than this from the poop that was collected 24 hours later.
Right.
As someone who's a dog trainer, who cares at this point? Let this, like, other people, like, I can do this for you. Let me do it, right?
Right.
When you just look at it, it's like, oh, there's a subset. It means it doesn't apply to just every single dog. Let's find out why.
Yeah, totally. And it that actually makes a lot of sense, because if it's not statistically extremely significant, then you're right. I mean, a lot of people don't like to admit this, I guess, but there's sort of a worth it factor, and not just because of the hassle of learning it and like adding it to the repertoire, though that is a hassle, but also because people struggle to remember all the time, though subconsciously they do, but like they struggle to intellectually remember that there's costs to everything. And if you're going to be adding something to your game, then that means there's a period of time where you're really bad at something new as opposed to being really good at what you've been working on. And obviously it's good to grow and it's good to get better, but there is a worth it factor. Do I need to invest into this particular thing, or can I overlook it for this other one type thing, right?
Yeah.
And I see this in the running joke in this podcast is Brent hates jujitsu metaphors, but in jujitsu, it factors in my mind kind of like this. So as a newer grappler, you don't know everything. You know almost nothing actually. So you kind of learn one game well enough, like I'm going to go for the arm bar, blah, 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 that in tournament, I have one task, arguably two tasks, but the second task is don't let them get to their game, right? So the problem is when you learn one more game, now I'm good at the arm bar and the Ezekiel or whatever. Now the problem is there is a period of time when you're not good enough at this one. You should have just went with the arm bar. And eventually you'll be good enough at both that now you have two offensive weapons and now you're harder to deal with in XYZ. But that middle ground, it hurts from time to time, right? So that is an interesting perspective of like, is it even worth it to get into this right now? Or should I just be really good at like X?
Yes. My husband used to do jiu-jitsu too.
Oh, cool.
So I did get some memes and metaphors out of it too.
Sure.
And for him, what he basically said, like he was like, he hasn't done this for too long, maybe 3 years, but like up until the last year, it was like, I don't know nothing. Nothing works. I never win. I always have to tap, because it keeps you very, very humble. And like you said, like my only thing that I focused on was whatever move I wanted to make it as smooth and like technically correct as possible. Mm-hmm. And when I said earlier, it's like things come to you when they're supposed to come to you. That's part of that too, right? Like get your fundamentals down and then expand and try to see. Don't try to talk about things you may not be ready. You don't overwhelm yourself because that leads to a lot of misinformation that we have currently. And like in jiu-jitsu, me, it's like people get hurt. Dogs get hurt if you kind of try things you may or may not be ready, and stay humble.
Right.
Entire path, basically.
Well, you know what jiu-jitsu practitioners and scientific researchers have in common that dog trainers don't, but they should, is sabbaticals. So I'm super serious, like when you're learning a new game, you stop competing until you have it, or you don't try to use it in competition until it's competition ready. And that's a totally different like criteria than just, can I do this on the mats with my team who go like half speed, right? In dog training, at least I think, is when you're learning a new skill set, all on top of what we talked about earlier, like there should be, I think, a series of lectures or something on how to take better notes, how to intake information, better recall memory, mind mapping, bar graphing, etc. But dog trainers should also get into the habit, whatever this looks like, I don't know, of taking a sort of a sabbatical. Like if you're trying something new, don't do it with a paying customer with expectation of outcome and, and different things like that. That way, when you're ready to compete, then you compete, so to speak.
That takes a great deal of like self-reflection.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, I guess jiu-jitsu, it teaches you because other people beat you. Yeah.
True, you don't have a choice.
Yeah.
You're right.
You might try, but you get told like, nope, you're not there.
Awesome. Thanks so much for being on with us. Do you have anything coming up that you want to bring people's attention to? Any like future
Seminars
events, any future collaborations, online content?
Yeah. So I think the biggest thing again will be my program. It will be a brand new program. I'm currently collecting basically yeses from people that I want to have them do an expert talk or presentation. So it will be me presenting fundamentals for dog behavior related stuff, mostly neurobiology, genetics, ethology. And then I will have 3 trainers and 3 scientists give expert presentations on anatomy of dogs, on genetics of dogs, on training certain things, motivation. That, again, doesn't just come from me then. And that will be almost like I don't want to say boot camp, but it will be an intense 2 weeks virtual. It will be virtual, but it will be an intense 2 weeks. There will be homework. I will teach how to read a scientific paper. There will be a test at the end. Multiple choice test, just to kind of, do basically all the things that we talked about today. And that will come out in January once we moved. And then other than that, it's going to be some seminars. So there will be one seminar on the East Coast at some point early next year. I will be in Costa Rica, so listening, and there's Costa Rica, come there, and then
The
Australia.
seminar in Costa Rica?
I know, there will be a retreat /
okay.
educational event with
I like
a
that.
happy hour at the beach.
You're right.
Sounds good.
That's awesome. That sounds like fun.
Yeah. So Australia as well. So of course there will be a big thing, and that should cover almost up until the next half.
That's great. That's exciting. We're looking forward to 25. I think it's going to be a lot of fun with dog training. A lot of
Yes,
big stuff coming this year.
I think so too.
Well, thanks again for being on with us. I wanted to kind of give just a quick list of where people can find you. So it's caninedecoded.com. On Instagram, it's at Canine Decoded. On YouTube, it's dr.Melanie Ude. Is there anything else, any other websites or things you want me to draw attention to?
No, these are YouTube is the biggest. Instagram and my website are like the main things that I think people can draw a lot of information from.
Perfect. Well, again, thank you so much, Melanie, for joining us on this podcast for today. We can't wait to see you Canology 3. That's going to be really, really fun. We'll have to go grab some drinks, and we'll have to have you back when you start your online boot camp. We'd love to have you back because there's a lot of people listening that I think would be able to benefit from that education and that learning how to learn concept. Great. So again, thank you so much, Melanie. I want to go too. Wait, no, real quick. Is it something that I could do my job and also take the course as well? Is it live?
Yes, it will be. Yes, it will be suitable for people can. It will be kind of like evening classes almost.
Got it. So they can fold it into their schedule. All right, that's perfect. So I'll probably join too. All right, awesome. Well, thank you so much, Melanie, for joining us. My name is Brent LaBrada, and that guy over there is Mariano Alvarez. And we will see you guys on the next episode of the Dog Trainers Podcast. Peace.
Thank you for listening to the Dog Trainers Podcast, a podcast created by dog trainers, for dog trainers, or anyone who's ever fallen in love with man's best friend.
We really hope that you enjoyed this episode and can't wait to be back with you guys. Be sure to follow us at Dog Trainers Podcast on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube. And don't forget to punch the hell out of that subscribe button and leave us a review.
Remember, guys, this is your podcast. You're the best listeners in the world, and we'll see you next time.